It was a typical but particularly exhausting late summer day in Germany. Axel, 55 years old, a service technician from Stuttgart, had received a call from his boss at 5:30 in the morning. A large CNC machine in a factory hall near Friedrichshafen on Lake Constance had broken down. Production was at a standstill, and a circuit board needed to be replaced immediately. "Drive there, Axel, today. They're waiting for you." The drive was long, the disassembly of the machine even longer, screw by screw, cable by cable, until his hands trembled and his back ached. When he finally finished installing the new parts and the machine was running again, the sun was already low over the lake. It was late afternoon, almost evening. On the A81 heading back toward Stuttgart, Axel suddenly felt a deep inner restlessness. Not the bad kind, more like a quiet, urgent tugging at his heart. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind of overtime, colleagues' family problems, and his own feeling that life consisted only of duties. He needed silence, real silence. At the next exit, he turned on his blinker without knowing exactly where he was going. He followed a small sign near Horb that led into the forest. After a few kilometers on a narrow forest road, he parked his van, pulled on his old fleece jacket, and stepped out. The air was wonderful, cool, clear, heavy with the scent of resin, damp moss, and late summer wildflowers. The highway was now only a distant, barely noticeable hum, 2 kilometers away. Axel started walking, just like that, without a plan. His steps crunched softly on the forest floor. With every meter, some of the tension from the last hours fell away. He breathed deeper, his shoulders relaxed. For the first time in weeks, he felt like a human being again, not just a repair machine. After about 20 minutes, the dense forest suddenly opened into a sunlit clearing, and at the edge stood a large, solidly built hunting stand. Not some rickety childhood platform made of a few boards, but a real, professionally built wooden cabin on stilts. With a small covered platform, glassless windows, and a solid door. Axel stopped and smiled quietly. Memories came flooding back. How, as a boy, he had sat for hours on such stands, with a piece of bread and a bottle of soda, simply listening to the wind. Today, that was probably no longer allowed. But he wouldn't damage anything. He would leave everything as clean as he had found it. Slowly, he climbed the ladder. When he reached the top, he slid back the bolt on the door. It opened from the outside, and stepped in. His heart skipped a beat. On the bench sat a woman, mid-40s, long dark brown hair shimmering slightly in the sun, warm brown eyes now staring at him in shock. She flinched, her hands tightly gripping a thermos. And then her eyes widened. Axel? He needed 2 or 3 seconds. Then the realization hit him like a warm, gentle wave. Paula? Paula, his old friend from their house church group many years ago. They had prayed together, laughed together, talked about life together. Then she had moved to Horb with her husband. The children had grown up. Everyday life had pulled them apart. They had completely lost touch. Paula began to smile, a cautious but genuine, warm smile that made her eyes light up. "What in the world are you doing up here?" she asked softly, almost disbelieving. I don't really know myself," Axel answered, feeling warmth rise in his face. "I just needed quiet. The highway, the work. I had to get out. And you?" She looked briefly to the side, out into the forest where the sun was already low between the trees, bathing everything in golden, almost holy light. "I come here often," she said quietly, "when it gets too loud at home." Axel felt a gentle stab in his heart. He knew that tone. He asked carefully, "May I sit? Just for a moment. I really don't want to disturb you. If you'd rather be alone—" "No, stay," she said quickly, and slid over a bit so there was a meter of bench between them. "There's enough space, and it's good to see you." He sat down at the other end. The hunting stand swayed gently in the wind. The closeness suddenly felt intense, not physically, but emotionally. There was something old and familiar that was immediately present again, an attraction both felt without putting it into words. They looked at each other, and for a brief moment there was a silent understanding. Two people who had once been close, two believers whom life had shaped. And then the conversation began. First cautiously, then more and more openly. They talked about the children, who were now grown, about work, about mutual acquaintances from the old church group, who was still there, who had left. They laughed softly about old stories from the house church, about the crazy prayer night when the power went out and they continued by candlelight. Eventually, Paula grew quieter. She looked out into the forest for a long time. The golden rays grew longer, the light softer. Her hands gripped the thermos tighter. Then she said with a voice that cracked slightly, "My marriage, it's hard, Axel, really hard. Sometimes on the edge. We live side by side. The words get colder and colder. And I feel so alone, even though there are two of us." Tears rose in her eyes. She didn't wipe them away. Axel felt his own heart tighten. He felt a deep pull toward this vulnerable, honest woman, not as a man to a woman, but as a brother in faith to a suffering sister. And yet there was also that warm, human attraction that he immediately recognized and immediately handed over to God. He stayed exactly where he was. The distance remained. It was important. Axel simply listened, for a long time, without interrupting. When she finished, a heavy but holy silence hung in the hunting stand. The sun now almost touched the treetops. He searched for words, something comforting, something helpful. And then, it happened. Later, Axel could no longer remember how it started. He only knew that suddenly sentences came out of his mouth that he had never prepared. Words full of depth and tenderness. He spoke about forgiveness that does not first demand from the other, but first gives. About the love that Jesus places in the center of a marriage, not as a nice idea, but as a daily, painful decision. About the power that lies in humility. About the Holy Spirit who works most strongly precisely in the most broken moments. He spoke for almost half an hour, calmly but with a conviction and warmth that did not come from himself. Paula sat there, listened, wept quietly, and nodded again and again. Sometimes she smiled through the tears, a smile so full of hope that Axel himself got goosebumps. The attraction between them was palpable, two souls that in this moment felt very close, carried by the same spirit. But they kept the distance. No touching, no sliding closer. Only words and glances that were open before God. When Axel finally fell silent, it had become almost dark. The first stars appeared between the treetops. Paula wiped her eyes and said with a trembling voice, "Thank you, Axel. Those were exactly the words I had needed for months. I believe God just spoke to me through you." They exchanged phone numbers. "Let's stay in touch," Paula said softly. "I want to tell you how it continues, and thank you for just being here." Axel drove home. During the rest of the drive, he desperately tried to remember the exact sentences he had said, but he couldn't. It was as if someone else had spoken through him. He could remember the feeling, the warmth, the deep certainty, the attraction to this woman that he had immediately placed in God's hands. The words themselves, however, were gone. In the following days, they sent each other a few short texts. Nothing big, just, "How are you today? I'm praying for both of you. Thank you for listening." After about 8 weeks, a longer message came from Paula. "Dear Axel, I have to tell you something. The things you said to me that day on the hunting stand, they changed something deep inside me. I started seeing my husband not as an enemy anymore, but as someone who is also hurt. I started praying properly, not just out of desperation, but out of love. And it's incredible. It's getting better, slowly but noticeably better. We're talking again. He has become more open. I don't know how to thank you. By the way, I asked you if you still remembered the words. You said you didn't. Now I understand why. I believe the Holy Spirit spoke through you, and you were only allowed to pass them on, not keep them. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart. Paula. Axel sat for a long time in front of his phone, staring at the message. He really couldn't remember a single word. Not one. And in that moment, it became completely clear to him. God had used him in that moment as a tool. The attraction he had felt had not been random. It was the moment when God had led him especially close to Paula's heart, so that his words could flow through him. And then he had taken the words out of his memory again, so that Axel would not become proud, so that he would know it had never been his own wisdom. The months passed. The contact remained. Paula wrote to him from time to time about how things were going. The marriage actually got better. Not perfect, but noticeably healthier. There were setbacks, but also real, tangible progress. Eventually, the point came when her husband said, "I can't go that far. This faith thing is too much for me." Paula stood before a new boundary again. In her last message, she wrote, "I don't know how it will continue, Axel, but I know that God is not letting me go, and I am not letting him go either. He has led us this far, through a hunting stand in the forest and through words that did not come from you. He will lead us further, whether together with my husband or on another path. I have peace." Axel read the message and smiled quietly into the silence of his apartment. Sometimes, when he walks alone through the forest today, he looks up at such hunting stands and whispers softly, "Lord, if you want to speak through me again, please do. I don't need to keep the words. I just want to be your tool. And I thank you for Paula and for the distance you gave us." Thank you from the bottom of my heart for watching this story with me until the end. In a world that often feels cold and noisy, stories like this, profound, heartfelt, and full of faith, are so important. If you'd like more of these, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new one. Let me know in the comments how this story touched you. I really read every single comment. May God bless you with a wonderful day. See you soon.